Good evening. Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We have several breaking stories that we are following right now. They all appear to follow the same general thing. So first and foremost, there was a serious terror attack in Montreal today. Now, the suspect has been killed at this point by police. That said, the police also appear to have killed an innocent bystander. So there is some video of this. It is far too graphic for me to play on the show here. I will play just the first couple of frames of it to set up what is going on. It is muted as well because the lady who is filming this from her balcony is terrified and is understandably so, using some rather rough language to describe what's going on. So there is a what appears to be a young man in some kind of camouflaged uniform that is rushing over past this grocery store. We're going to get to some of that here in a couple of minutes. As he moves across the area, there's an individual that's out walking, seems to be confused, and I want to be very, very, very careful and probably jump ahead so that I don't show the body over on camera if I can refrain from doing so. At one moment, there are a couple of police officers that he is engaged in a shootout with right behind this little barrier that you see on screen next to the white car. And there is a female police officer who crouches down and with other officers who've exchanged fire, have been hit. There is an innocent bystander who runs up to take shelter next to her. She immediately panics, turns, points her gun at him, and kills the innocent bystander right then and there. So there are 3 dead right now that we know of. One Montreal police officer, male, described as the first killed in the line of duty in 24 years. His name has not yet been publicly released. One civilian, whose name is Michael Mizrahi. He's also referred to as Rabbi Michael Moshe Mizrahi. He's a Jewish community member associated with a local Shabbat center. And then the suspect and gunman, who is reportedly a lone actor, and his name also withheld. Now, at least one female Montreal police officer was shot by the suspect, and she was injured. She is currently stable in the hospital. And there may also be one other civilian with minor injuries. It is believed at this moment that the female Montreal police officer shot the civilian. So again, there was a police officer who we know was shot by the shooter. The shooter is also dead. The only other casualty that we have right now, other than a civilian who is injured, is the officer's quarry. The individual who took shelter next to the officer was shot by the female police officer in Montreal. Now, the key points from the police and officials at this time, they're in French, so these had to be translated. SPVM Chief Fady Dagger called it, quote, a tragedy, a nightmare, the worst thing you can have, end quote, and noted that it had been 24 years since Montreal had lost an officer in the line of duty. He confirmed that the suspect was neutralized or dead. He then urged the public to avoid rumors. And said the immediate threat was over. Now, the Independent Bureau de Enquêtes Indépendants, the BEI, is investigating the police use of force and the suspect's death. They are reportedly investigating both the police officers who shot the suspect, as in shot the active shooter, and then also the female officer who shot the innocent civilian. So Mark Carney has issued his condolences, thanking the courageous officers. The area is currently in the middle of reopening. Very, very disturbing situation. I will say 2 things. So one of the cases that's been getting a lot of play online is, what was this area, and do we know anything about it being targeted? This is a Jewish area of Montreal. That is what we are aware of so far. There are reports that this individual had a manifesto that was very anti-woman. There is nothing at all that suggests that is true or false at this time. Making that very clear to you. Here is one thing that I will say, because I've seen a lot of individuals on the left, some on the right, doing a lot of pearl clutching over people pointing out the female police officer. So here goes. There is an instance, a pattern over the last couple of years in which there are female police officers who are in high stress situations who do not perform as well as their male counterparts. Additionally, in cases like the Uvalde shooting, there are also cases of police officers who are too terrified and chicken to go in and deal with threats. To make this very, very clear here on the show right up front, whether or not you are a male or a female, if you do not have what it takes to rush into the line of fire, you should not be a cop. Go do something else, anything else. If you are not an individual who is willing to give your life for your country, do not join the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard. No one wants you there. Do not join possible jobs where you might have to give your life if you are not willing to give your life. You wearing the uniform to look pretty is not that important. So we'll give you some of the information right now, but this is, again, a broader Western Hemisphere. And then, of course, also the Europeans as well are having a significant moment where they respond to different governments and how certain groups are being targeted, mass casualty incidents like the shooting, or whether we're talking about the mass sexual assault of young ladies over in either South America or in the United Kingdom, or, Germany and other countries in Europe and Africa that have imported lots and lots and lots of one very specific kind of immigrant. So that brings us to the reaction. The other side of the big news today comes from the election for president in Colombia. So as a very quick reminder, back in June 2023, in South America, there were 3 right-wing governments and there were 10 left-wing governments. As of today, in June of 2026, there are now 7 right-wing governments and 6 left-wing governments. Denoted here on this map that you're seeing on screen, left is in red here and the right is in blue. Now, as to this particular election, the presidential election, very hotly contested, very, very close. The winner, a Trump ally, Abelardo de la Espriella. So there was a first round election back on May 31st of 2026, and the runoff was yesterday. So the incumbent president, Gustavo Petro, obviously on the left, was term limited and could not run again. So the race ended up pitting the right-wing outsider, de la Espriella, the Trump-endorsed lawyer and businessman, independent/conservative platform focusing on putting criminals in prison, not allowing mass immigration, other anti-crime measures, and stronger ties with the United States, against the leftist Senator Ivan Cepeda. So he's a very close Petro ally. He's emphasized very socialist reforms and very, very heavily emphasized them in that instance. So what do we now have? Well, the preliminary tally with 99.9% of the votes counted because, unlike California, Colombia is a first world country that actually can count its ballots. De la Espriella narrowly won the runoff with 49.66% of the votes versus Cepeda's 48.7%. So that's a margin 12.959 million voters to 12.708709 million voters. That's a 250,000 vote margin. That's very, 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 very close. Now, de la Espriella received the highest number of votes for any presidential candidate in Colombian history. It was a very, very, very close election. Now, because of this razor-thin victory, we get some of the interesting individuals. First of all, the larger population of Colombia is in the streets doing a lot of celebrating. And there are a couple of reasons why. One of those would be Ecuador and other nations in South America that have made it quite clear that if you actually enforce the law, if you actually attempt to make a concerted effort to keep your civilians safe, then right-wing governments, especially after all of the gang violence, all of the migrant violence, all of the human trafficking, all of the large-scale abuse and rape and arson and numbers of other social ills, it turns out that being told, oh, but maybe you'll be slaughtered and butchered in the street, but we'll give you free health care. Yeah, that's not enough for people. That is really not enough for people, and understandably so. Radio crew, we're going to send you over to the commercial break, and we're going to continue over here on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So again, sorry, and I want to clarify here, not Ecuador, but El Salvador being kind of the benchmark in Central America, not South America. Nayib Bukele would be the right-wing populist who started building large prisons and just throwing all of the criminals and the gang members and the cartel members in prison. To great effect, by the way. Of course, Chile elected Jose Antonio Cast, a conservative, in December of 2025. Javier Milei is still holding strong in Argentina, and things are going to continue. Now, the response to this has been hilarious so far. So the left has suggested down there that, well, the election was super duper ultra rigged. And this is being passed, again, so far, this is being passed and presented by the guy who lost the election as a voter software manipulation. So, first of all, the Inspector General, Gregorio Eljach, who is, again, the Inspector General overseeing the progress of the vote count, he's not a really right-wing guy. And I'll play the clip here, even though he's speaking in rapid-fire Spanish.
Walk through some of this. The Iranians are saying...
Not that clip. Nice try. The particular interview on this matter, I think we actually have it ready to go. There you go.
La narrativa de fraude, las instituciones. ¿Cuál es ese mensaje? Fraude.
So he was asked, well, hey, you know, there are a lot of accusations that this election was stolen. He emphasized in counter that any challenges will be addressed by competent authorities. They will be taken seriously. However, there has been no evidence of any kind of fraud in the process considered because the electoral voting software was closed loop. So closed loop means it isn't just hooked up to the internet like your smart TV and microwave for some freaking reason. It was pretty closed loop. No one was touching it except for the officials of the government, not a right-wing government, in Colombia. So then he said that the official results would be certified by the National Electoral Council. Now, then comes out the socialist guy, Cepeda. He's very, very upset. And then it says, I will now present the algorithms that render the Batista Brothers software vulnerable. Algorithms that allow powerful states with significant computing power to effectively displace Colombian citizens. Because the software was not submitted for an audit, this terrible vulnerability went undetected. Oh, incredible. So what is it that he actually suggests here? First of all, he invites President Trump to engage in dialogue, which, LOL, and then turns around and alleges that it is Israel. It's the Jews have turned over the socialists to give the election to the far-right party. And I find this really hilarious. I find it hilarious for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons that I do indeed find this truly nonsensical, worth a good gut-busting laugh, is that aren't the Jews supposed to be Bolshevists? Isn't that what Candace Owens, you know, the illiterate chick who can't pronounce words over 2 syllables, and sometimes not even then, didn't she, like, before she just went fully anti-Semite, like, she called them Bolshevists for a while? Aren't the Jews supposed to be pro-socialism? What's the deal here? Okay, I'm sorry. I know socialists are retarded. You know, you do what you can. Now, again, Gustavo Petro from the president's office, originally, when the right-wing candidate, again, the one who would later end up winning, Espriella, when he was running, he said, look, I'm running on making sure that we have order, that we have a free market, and that our citizens are safe. And I'm not joking. The actual quote in response to mock him, Gustavo Petro said in response, and I quote, "Hail Hitler," meaning like, if you suggest that you want free markets, yes, no one had freer markets than Adolf, the angry mustache man. It just needed order and to stop mass amounts of crime. Yes, Hitler, very famous for stopping burning of shops and local economic districts. Interesting. Yeah, no. So our thoughts and prayers to those down in Colombia who are going to have to deal with these protests. Now, there's other political moves as well. Kier Starmer, as well as some stuff going on here with our FBI and DOJ. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal. So I've said at the beginning of the show, all of the geopolitical events that you are seeing right now around the world are in response to the massive upswing in the violence that always follows the socially justice tut-tuttery that was the marker of the late 20-aughts and the 2010s. where we would simply say, actually, you can't say that some cultures are bad and that some cultures who say they want to kill people, you can't actually. You know what's really valuable? Diversity and friendship. And that really, if you just tell someone who, thinks it's good to behead people, that they need to follow your culture, that's like super duper ultra racist, that kind of, that kind of thing. So after a decade of that, a lot of countries around the world are responding directly to the violence that flows right in. The violence that flows right in. So on Friday, I shared with those on this show that after watching the United Kingdom's Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, call on Keir Starmer to step down, that was it. He was going to go, he was going to take the weekend, and he was going to resign. And the reason was because the Labour Party is hemorrhaging. The Labour Party, the premier leftist party of the United Kingdom, is in serious, serious trouble. Because Keir Starmer essentially did the middle-aged leftist woman tut-tuttering and made it his entire personality. And then he would turn around and he would gaslight everyone and claim he was doing the exact opposite. So you would see a violent murder or a violent series of sexual assaults or human trafficking, or you would see mass theft and arson and looting and all other kinds of Islamic fundamentalist violence or just standard third world fundamentalist violence. And Keir Starmer would go out and say, the important thing to know is that we're all in England, and I will continue as the Prime Minister to make sure that no one is being racist towards these precious, wonderful people. And that didn't work. And so in local elections, the Labour Party lost what is one of the most severe, just one of the greatest electoral shellackings in decades for a party on the local level. And so there were certain individuals like Andy Burnham in the Labour Party who was kind of rising through the ranks saying, we got to get rid of this guy or the Conservatives are going to take over, or even worse, the Reform Party. Oh no, the Reform Party, again, as Rupert Lowe published the very detailed and disturbing dossier on the same kinds of mass Islamic violence that Keir Starmer openly defended, and as prosecutor released individuals back out on the street without so much as I better not do that, mate. So that brings us over to today. Keir Starmer had trundled up in front. I woke up this morning to find this news, and did I giggle? No, I didn't giggle. President Trump, however, yesterday, I will say before we get to this, I don't think I have this loaded in the B-roll footage. Do I? I do. He said, Keir Starmer will resign as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He failed badly on two important subjects, immigration and energy, in parentheses, open North Sea oil. And then, I wish him well, President DJT. And the President of the United States kind of taking a victory lap here. Keir Starmer is not resigning just because of energy. The Labour Party is not actually pushing anything forward. Just like Canada with Mark Carney, you're not actually seeing any Labour policies that are for turning on the lights at home. But that's not really why they're being cast out. And the Labour Party really hasn't figured that out yet, if they ever will. But anywho, Keir Starmer got up in front of the country and in the most depressed Eeyore tones possible, he's like, I'm leaving, but I'm going to be something even better. A father, a husband, and a good friend to my wife's boyfriend. Here's Keir Starmer.
And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy. Thank you very much.
I love it. I do. Straight into my veins. Now he, again, this is the very emotional kind of Barack Obama, Joe Biden, getting a very clear message from the people. I mean, say what it is that you will about Donald Trump, but when Donald Trump makes a decision that is unpopular, things usually don't stick in that vein for very long. Even on the tariffs thing, for example, the president is kind of pulled away from some things that are considered economically not as thrilling to many Americans. Now, again, in the Rust Belt, that's kind of a different question. We will get there. But first, Keir Starmer couldn't get away without doing the old Joe Biden and Barack Obama style gaslighting. which is where he says, actually, I was quite good. People just didn't understand. It's just like Star Wars. And so after the Star Wars sequel trilogy came out and they were universally hated, then it came out, people just didn't understand what we were trying to do. It's because people are sexist and mean. Here's Keir Starmer giving that a go.
6 years ago, I inherited a Labour Party that was politically, financially, and morally bankrupt.
That's a serious thing to say about your party, by the way. Don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. I really enjoy, as much as the next guy, watching a complete toddler throw down his toys and leave because he sucks at his job. Tucker Carlson would be a great example of this. Announced he's leaving the GOP today because he's awful at any kind of anything outside of, click whoring. But in the meantime, Keir Starmer here, he's trying the same thing. He's like, I inherited a party that was sad. No one was at Chuck E. Cheese's, and I vowed to do something about it.
I was told time and time again that my party was finished.
And it just lost more seats than I believe the Labour Party has in local elections since the 60s.
We were consigned to history, that a majority at the general election, let alone a landslide majority, was impossible. But we proved those people wrong.
Yeah, you sure did. Now he got up and he has his success record. Here you go.
Hotels closing, protecting young people from social media, and 500,000 children being lifted out of poverty because of the choices that I made.
Yep. So there's I defended children, unless they are, again, the 250,000 young English women who were systematically targeted, abused, trafficked, raped, and again, just as the testimonies show, as numerous cases show, Keir Starmer's government refused to investigate any of it at all whatsoever. And of course, here in the United States, a lot of that has received next to no funding. And again, you may notice on the views for the show this very evening that things are a little on the low side, because there are several videos on the broader social media sphere that, when mentioning this story, just so happened to get shut a little bit down. So what's next? Is Keir Starmer actually in this current position? Are we actually seeing Keir Starmer step down and conservatives or the Reform Party take over? No. A formal contest will officially begin in early July to replace Starmer. This with former Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham as the clear frontrunner to succeed as the leader of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom. Now, Burnham actually had a response. So everyone's saying, oh man, the Keir Starmer thing is over. That was a close one. And it just so happens that Andy Burnham is, again, he's from the Labour Party. The Labour Party has not lost in the actual parliamentary elections yet. So Andy Burnham got up and gave an announcement, said, Keir has given a huge service to our country, and I want to thank him for his leadership and dedication during such a challenging period. So further on down, he says, as we move forward, our priority must be to work together to get the country back to where we all want it to be. People want to see progress on economic growth, cost of living, public services, housing opportunities for the next generation. By the way, what that means is government-funded housing continuing for migrants in the UK. Now, the left is trying the same strategy here at home in the United States. That is also just not at all going to work. We're going to talk about it. Radio crew, we are going to see you guys on the other side of the commercial break. We're going to talk here on the live stream in the meantime. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So Democrats are trying the United Kingdom's labor approach. Really, the Democrats here at home, in a very contentious midterm in which, yes, the Democrats could clean house if they wanted to. Here at home, the Democrats really could do a little something that is useful, that actually brings their party forward. Instead, what we have gotten is a bunch of bitter, angry children whining about those who suggest crime is bad. We'll get to some of that with federal judges here in a minute. So throwing all the federal judges in to block anyone, trying to uphold the rule of law in the country. But who are we really going to go after? The rich people. Because why are you poor? Because Elon Musk is rich or something. Are you right? The next potential Speaker of the House, Ro Khanna, with the left's Joe Rogan over Botox Jennifer Welch. Here you go.
But think about this, Jennifer. For 5% tax one time on Elon Musk, you could have universal childcare in America, $10 a day for every family. That's one person, one time, 5%, and he wouldn't even miss it because the market would grow by 15% and his wealth would still grow. And yet they're opposed to something as basic as that.
Here's the problem. That's just completely made up. Elon Musk and others, financials who don't even like Musk, pointed out, they said, please show me how I give 5% of my wealth right now and it funds all of these things, and I'll give it freely. We don't even have to go through the tax process. I'll fund it directly right here, right now. Was there any answer? Shucks, what a shame. Man. So this seems to be the case that is always trotted out. And we saw this during the last election cycle. We saw it during the previous election cycle, where Democrats who Americans increasingly do not trust on social issues are expecting the Democrats to moderate on social issues and then offer kind of a pendulum swing to Trump on the economy towards, honestly, a more corporatist affect. A technocratic affect is what Americans are looking for. The average American in the economy is looking for a more technocratic approach to the economy. Does that mean that's necessarily the answer? No, just because people want something doesn't mean that's necessarily the answer. However, in this instance, it gets a little bit rough for the left. Why? Because right now, Democrats should be gaining massive record numbers of people signing up to join the party. And every time a party is in power, so for example, during the entire Joe Biden term of office, Republican registration surged. Because the party who is not in power always surges in registration numbers while the other party's in power. It's very easy to be the opposition. It is. So easy to be the opposition, governing's harder. So right now, we should be seeing Democrat registration skyrocket. Are we seeing that?
Nope.
And here's why. According to the Morning Consult poll, the ABC and YouGov poll, and then just the straight up data, more independent voters are being created right now than at any other time in recent history. Instead of Democrats gaining, people are just not registering for any party or registering as independents. You say, well, how are Republicans doing? About normal when it comes to a party who is in power. Meaning that people are saying, yeah, maybe I don't really care for some of the things Republicans aren't doing in Congress. We're going to get to that in a little bit here. But you know what I really don't like? The idea that, well, if you just tax the wealthy, you just tax everyone, but not me and my second lake house, Bernie Sanders. If you tax everyone else, it'll be amazing. It'll be perfect. You have to remember that Elon Musk is very bad because he wants to go to space. And we all know that billionaires want to go to space so they don't have to pay taxes. Bernie Sanders. And I look at AOC's butt. Incredible. I mean, if you want to roll with this, best of luck to you there, rootin' tootin' cowboy. Seriously, I don't know how this is actually going to work, but never fear, because the federal judges are here. We're going to get to that in a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We got to bring that radio crew back from commercial.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
369 girls wanna drink
Welcome
wine.
back to the
Tell
Tony
them I
Kinnett
love
Cast
the
here on
waistline.
the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Well, if Democrats in Congress can't actually get it together, never fear. Do not worry, young lad or lass. I have great news. You see, we keep a video clip around just for kicks and giggles, but it comes in such useful. This would be Chuck Schumer at the beginning of the second Trump administration telling a rather worried press that he's just not so worried. And the reason that he's not worried is because he presided in the Senate over the confirmation of a ton of justices, all kinds of federal circuit judges and appellate court judges who are going to be activists. Meaning that even if Congress does relatively little, and even if the Trump administration does a lot of things that Americans elected the Trump administration and its Congress to do, then the federal judges are still going to decide based on any random day, an astrology chart, and a Facebook birthday counter, what just happens to be the interpretation of the law. So as a reminder, here was Chuck letting you know exactly how this term was going to go at the beginning of it.
There are those who believe that we are, in real time, living through an assault on the constitutional order. Do you believe that we are in a constitutional crisis right now?
Yes, our democracy is at risk because Donald Trump shows that he wishes to violate the laws in many, many different ways. The good news here is we did put 235 judges, progressive judges, judges not under the control of Trump last year on the bench, and they are ruling against Trump time after time after time.
There you go. It's just open admission. We put a bunch of activist judges on the bench, and so we count on doing whatever it is that we need to do, no matter how bad the evidence looks. Enter in Tim Walz and governor of Minnesota, who again did not continue his gubernatorial campaign. Why? Well, because he's in very, very deep doo-doo over fraud, and also not cooperating with the Justice Department, and the list just goes on and on and on. So today, after a series of subpoenas issued, by a grand jury via the Department of Justice to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and then its Attorney General Keith Ellison, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and then St. Paul Mayor, Cowley, whatever, as part of a criminal investigation into whether they conspired to obstruct federal immigration enforcement during Metro Surge. This probe that was used was under 18 U.S. Code 372. It's the very same conspiracy statute applied against the January 6th defendants. So how does the statute work? What am I talking about? Essentially, it's this. If the government suspects that you are involved in some kind of conspiracy to either defraud the federal government or to commit some kind of a crime or to aid and abet those who are acting against an official federal action, then you are going to face a rather unfriendly probe into all of your communications to see if, in fact, at least in the Tim Walz case here, did you actually do things that violated federal law? So a judge, a federal judge, on Monday, today, quashed subpoenas. And by doing so here, essentially what the U.S. District Judge Patrick Schlitz, a Clinton appointee, suggested was that the Department of Justice's investigation was politically motivated and an attempt to harass and retaliate. That's it. He then suggested that Minnesota has a legal right not to devote resources to enforcing federal immigration law, which is true, but not what the subpoenas were about. And then said he found, quote, extremely weak to non-existent connections to any criminal violation. Okay, so that's insane. If you have a judge that rules on whether or not subpoenas are worthwhile or not, you are to suggest a number of things based on the available evidence or the lack of available evidence, or if there is someone in the Department of Justice who did something illegally. For example, let's say there is an acting U.S. attorney, and this acting U.S. attorney was, let's say, over how long she was allowed to be an acting U.S. attorney. And then she still is in the middle of a series of lawsuits. Well, judges overturned and said, no, this acting U.S. attorney, she was only supposed to be temporary. She hasn't been confirmed by the Senate. I'm closing these cases. I'm denying them. We're sending them back to square one here. But in this case, the judge said, well, there's that statute there, but I think that the DOJ is really politically motivated. No, not at all. So again, as Governor Tim Walz, was a leading opponent of the immigration customs enforcement surge in Minneapolis, Minnesota earlier this year, he's been at the epicenter of a public welfare fraud scandal among a number of other crimes. The DOJ issued a litany of subpoenas, not just on this, but to other Minnesota officials as part of its probe, because in order to assess if anyone in the Minnesota state government told state police not to show up, if anyone in the Minnesota government told city officials to do something specific with their police departments, that's obstructing federal law enforcement. That is, if you suggest those kinds of things. Remember, Tim Walz suggested he was going to get out there with the National Guard of Minnesota and there was going to be a standoff. He said, let this be our Fort Sumter moment, which, yikes, is as far as that comparison. Rebelling from the government and calling yourself Fort Sumter. I don't know if I'd recommend that one. The judge did not rule that any of this at all was not available. In fact, the judge seems to throw a temper tantrum because the grand jury issued the subpoena, meaning the grand jury said, yeah, looks like this guy did it. So, quote, the only question then is whether the challenged subpoenas were issued for one of these forbidden purposes. The federal government cannot directly require those political opponents to take is a blatantly unlawful and unethical use of the grand jury process. So what he's mad about is that the federal government asked a grand jury, hey, here's the evidence here. You think that there should be a subpoena that we bring them on in for this? And the grand jury looked over it and said, oh boy, and then said, yeah. And so then the grand jury stamped their certification of approval via the Department of Justice on the subpoena. Now, is this over for Tim Walz at all? No. Not at all. In fact, the ruling only targets subpoenas, not the entire probe or any potential charges. The judge didn't rule that there was no crime or that the investigation was meritless overall, which is why this is nuts. I mean, this is the kind of thing you do if you're going to throw out a case, as we've seen lots of federal justices do, both for and against the Trump administration, by judges, both appointed by Democrats and then confirmed, and Republicans, and then confirmed by presidents from George W. Bush all the way, of course, Bill Clinton, then, of course, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, even Donald Trump appointed and confirmed justices have ruled against him and tossed cases out. However, in this case, the judge says, well, I mean, there's probably something to it, but I don't like these subpoenas. So Governor Tim Walz gets out there and he takes a little victory lap kind of a situation here. So he gets out there and says, I will never stop exercising my constitutional rights to stand up for Minnesotans and the American freedoms we hold dear. And he releases this long little special JPEG press release. Today's ruling is a victory for the rule of law in our democracy. A federal district judge found that the U.S. Department of Justice's investigation into me and other Minnesota elected officials was politically motivated, unconstitutional, and meritless. That's just a flat out lie. I encourage people. There is this really cool thing that you can do, and you're allowed to do this, by the way. Maybe not in the UK if you don't have a license for that, mate, but here in the United States, you have the freedom to read. I know. It's a truly incredible thing as we get ready for the 250th. You can read the judge's court order. And by the way, we know this because there's another case right behind this where federal Judge Sparkle is getting freaky. And she actually read a few things. She's just wrong. But in this case, the judge said, no, we're still fine. But no, that didn't like the subpoenas. So Tim Walz taking a victory lap. Is he still screwed? Yeah, there are other investigations and scrutiny still ongoing. The Feeding Our Future investigation that he is alleged to be very involved in, the Medicare and Social Services, the Medicaid, and Social Services fraud scandals, the congressional investigations, like the House Oversight Committee ongoing into the Walz administration's oversight failures. There is in no way, shape, or form some kind of a blanket sweep victory here that the man is trying his hardest to run. But federal judges are going to fight this tooth and nail because they were put in to be activist judges, and they are doing their part. Now, moving beyond there, we have another federal judge who's also trying to fight on behalf of fraud. We're going to get into that over here on the live stream. Radio crew, we're going to send you over to the commercial break. We're going to continue youtube.com/Daily Signal. In the meantime, it's the Tony Kinnett Cast. And as we get into this for their commercial break, if you would consider throwing a like on the video, that helps us a ton. So consider doing that. It's a huge, subscribing as well, hitting that little bell. Those are all very, very, very super things. Now, that brings us over to another federal judge today doing something that is extra bad. Federal Judge Sparkle Suknanan today blocked the administration, that'd be the Trump administration, from using existing federal data to purge non-citizens or the dead from voter roll. One more time here. Federal Judge Sparkle Suknanan today blocked the Trump administration from using existing federal data from the IRS and the United States Department of Agriculture and other federal agencies from using their existing record of United States citizens to then purge non-citizens or the dead from voter rolls. Now, how did the left frame this? So Kyle Cheney over at Politico, who, unlike some of his other colleagues, at Politico, you have some you have a couple of really good ones. Obviously, I'm quite fond of a lot of Adam Wren's coverage as their chief political correspondent guy. Kyle Cheney, however, one of their legal correspondents, this dude's a hack. So he framed it: a federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from implementing a new system that she says is being used by states to actively and haphazardly purge purported non-citizens from voter rolls using inaccurate data. So what is this inaccurate data that she is suggesting is being used here? Well, again, according to the opinion from this very interesting judge, and we'll file her picture just so that you can see what this Judge Sparkle Suknanan has to say here. She's suggesting that the Trump administration, by consolidating Americans' sensitive data, that meaning verifying you're a citizen because of your social security number, like, hey, are you an American? Do you actually have a SOCH? Are you a citizen here in the United States? Well, if you're not and you're on the voter rolls in your state, then you need to be purged. You know, you should not be on the voter rolls at all, whatsoever, in any way, shape, or form. Now, curiously, and producer Daniel points this out, this is a Biden appointee. The Biden White House page of nominees that includes her, as she was nominated alongside 75 others, there's that Chuck Schumer reference there for you, says that, quote, these choices also continue to fulfill the president's promise to ensure that the nation's courts reflect the diversity that is one of our greatest assets as a country. So not she's really literate, not she's really good at her job, not, oh man, she's a really good justice. No, we just like how she's a nice color and gender. Her argument, by the way, that she's making here, that is being promoted by the Democracy Forward organization, is just that creating a federal database to confirm citizenship is illegal. Nope. Not at all. We're going to swing out to the commercial break. When we come back in, we're going to talk about some serious fraud investigation stuff with Elizabeth Mitchell, who's on the line. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
We go over to Elizabeth Mitchell, our White House correspondent, in the office today because she's getting a couple of different scoops over from the State Department. There was a lot of activity going on, and so we couldn't wait until she's out front on location. Elizabeth, tell us what you know. What's the scoop from the State Department?
Hi, Tony. So what's going on here is the State Department has revoked the visas of 3 foreign fraudsters who have been charged with defrauding the American people of millions and millions of their hard-earned dollars. These 3 people will no longer be allowed to enter the United States. Their visas have been revoked. They committed these crimes here on American soil, and they are going to be here no longer.
So tell us about some of these crimes. I know some of them are medical industry related fraud. But obviously, they're not all cut and copy pasted in the same way. Tell us a little bit about this series of visa revocations.
There's a variety of charges here. One foreign national is accused of stealing millions of dollars from people trying to grow their businesses by giving them bad advice on investments. And then another one was claiming to operate a legitimate business helping patients access health care, but it was in fact a Medicaid scam, billing more than $5 billion of fake services. And then the third person was faking revenue and fooling investors in order to make financial profit. So a lot of money was made off of lying and deceiving the American people by these foreign fraudsters.
Now, I've seen already some of the response to the State Department's move here to revoke and cancel visas, that this is inhumane and it's putting them at great health and safety risk. And it's so terrible. I mean, sure, hold them to accountability, but whatever you do, don't revoke their right to come to the United States. I understand that the FBI also made a pretty major arrest this afternoon that you have been following, maybe a little along the lines of why some of these visas are being revoked now, as opposed to just giving them a slap on the wrist as though this needs a common sense explanation.
Absolutely. So Kash Patel announced today that someone who committed perhaps the biggest Medicaid scam in history, we're talking about a $3.7 billion scheme, has been apprehended. This person was found overseas and is being transferred to the U.S. to face justice. Now, this is an absolutely massive fraud scam. That much money, billions of dollars. And so the person who I referenced earlier who had their visa revoked, that was in the millions instead of the billions. And so the goal here is to revoke these visas before it can get into these huge numbers. Of course, any amount of money the American people are defrauded of is too much, but they're trying to catch this early so it doesn't get to an even greater scale than it already has.
Did FBI Director Kash Patel give any indication as to what foreign region this individual was caught or what his name is? Just to make sure that I'm doing the maximum amount of pattern recognition here for, what'd you say, like $3.7 billion worth of Medicare and Medicaid fraud?
It's a lot of money. This person's name is Ibrahim Hilmi. He was found in Turkey and returned to the United States.
Well, I mean, there you have it. Elizabeth Mitchell, our White House correspondent, thanks for keeping a pretty close eye on these developing stories for the State Department. That scoop, of course, also the FBI Director's Office, and trying to get a lot of these individuals out of the country permanently or arrested and then thrown in prison. Thanks for giving us a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, before we get over to some of the foreign policy stuff regarding President Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, I did want to mention real quick in a hustle hurry, the United States of America hosting the World Cup has been a pretty phenomenal success. You say, why does this matter, Tony? Why are you sharing this? First of all, in the middle of America's 250th anniversary, bring all of the world in for their differing sports, for all of their biggest contests for the entire world, and then bring them here into our country, having a lot of Europeans, having a lot of those from Central and South America, from Africa, from Asia, openly celebrating the United States, suggesting, wow, it's a lot nicer here than I was led to believe. And then on July 4th, on our nation's 250th, playing England, at a moment when the English are not exactly doing too hot either, for the World Cup. I'm very, very, very excited about this. And one of the reasons I bring this up is that the United States, at least from the Trump administration, is attempting to set the stage for future major events brought in from around the world to the United States. Because if we have such incredible college infrastructure for sporting events, we have such incredible arts infrastructure, obviously our travel infrastructure is set and built to take large numbers of individuals, usually traveling intra-city and state, to go to various rival sporting events. The Trump administration actually setting the bar for future major revenue and, of course, American pride over the next couple of decades is a pretty big deal. And when we're talking about the Trump administration, a couple of other big, I would say, economic indicators on all of this plans and promises of recession, that it was all over and everything was terrible, the amount of manufacturing investment in the United States. And of course, what we're seeing now is the nation starts to turn less towards a white-collar centric college model, and once again towards trying to encourage young people to get into the trades. There really is a sense of decent optimism here in the country, at least for some of the economic indicators. So one of the reasons that I bring this up specifically is that, again, while we are seeing various individuals prepare themselves to run, not just in 2026 to 2028, there is an argument that is being made that now Democrats are the party of freedom and they're the party of innovation, among all these other things. Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Democrat who was posed to be a possible strong contender for the 2028 election. Now, after the left has gone really rabidly anti-Semitic, it's very unlikely we're going to see Josh Shapiro make it out of at least the earlier primaries, because we don't actually get into some of the more moderate Democrat states until too late, and that's by design. Shapiro made the case on a July 19th TV interview. He said, quote, "Real freedom lets parents like him and his wife, Lori, decide on when and whether to get vaccines for their children, alongside choices like abortion and school books." That is quite literally ridiculous. And, not just because, when we're looking at Shapiro's case, he presided over quite a bit of state or Commonwealth regulation that required individuals to get vaccines on a certain level. And he protected federal workers' vaccine stuff in October 2025, protecting vaccines amid federal changes, keeping the state standard school requirements, exemptions kind of thing. It's a really awkward flag that he wants to run for office. It is. It's a really, really awkward flag. The other really awkward flag right now of I want to run for office in 2028 is coming from Vice President J.D. Vance. More and more and more. Vance is staking a lot of his reputation and his claims on two things. One thing that is working and one thing that is not. So J.D. Vance has been working with Dr. Oz in the administration to combat fraud. You've seen this with regard to acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, or whether we're talking about Federal Bureau of Investigation Director Kash Patel. Of course, I just mentioned with Dr. Mehmet Oz, when we're looking at the number of fraud cases in the United States which are being actively prosecuted. And again, as Elizabeth just talked about, these visa holders who are participating in this fraud, getting their visas stripped and canceled. We've also seen immigrants the State Department is seeking to denaturalize. That's pretty important stuff. Unfortunately, Vance is one half the fraud stuff right now and one half the Iran stuff, and that ain't going well. It's not. We're going to cover that on the live stream. Tony Kinnett Cast. You guys over on the radio side, take care. YouTube.com/Daily Signal. We're going to keep on going. All right. While the radio crew is now heading out to their very beautiful end of evening joyousness, I want to cover just a little bit here of what's been going on in Switzerland. So as a reminder, on Friday, I made two predictions. My first prediction was that Keir Starmer was going to resign. My next prediction, based on the data, and a softer prediction, because like everything with the Middle East, it is always very, very up in the air, was that the White House had originally put out at least a statement over to CBS or an Axios that said Vance probably isn't going to be going over to Switzerland, but Steve Witkoff is going to be going. And then there was a flip on that. And Vance, I said, if Vance does end up going to Switzerland, there is not going to be any signing, any big deal. Nothing successful is actually going to happen. I'm sad to say that it turns out that's pretty close to where we are. So as of right now, and again, right here, right now, skipping ahead to the most immediate news, the Iranian chief negotiator and the head of their parliament, Ghalibaf, says, quote, an agreement has been finalized in Switzerland for the release of $12 billion in frozen Iranian assets. Now, hang on, because at first we were talking about this large Gulf state fund that was going to release money. Now we're talking about a $12 billion fund. Everything's changing really quickly. What's going on? Is it $300 billion? Is it $12 billion? Vance said it was $0. Trump said it was $0. Then things have changed. And this is Ghalibaf saying this. So take this with the smallest grain of salt that you can, and then toss that, because that's far too much to take him at here. But Ghalibaf also said, quote, the release of two separate $6 billion Iranian asset tranches was finalized in Switzerland with the Qatari government. Now that's funny, because it is Vice President J.D. Vance who said that the UAE and Qatar would not be allowed to release money to the Iranians unless the United States said so. Those were his words. I didn't tell him to say it. That is what he said. Now, Ghalibaf continued and said that since no final agreement has been reached, sanctions formally remain in place. However, under the signed agreement, again, it's just a memorandum of understanding. It doesn't hold any kind of diplomatic weight. But sanctions on Iranian oil exports have been suspended until a final deal is reached. Okay. What's actually going on right now? Vance is desperately trying to broker a deal with people who you can't broker a deal with. That's the truth. Vice President J.D. Vance is more of an isolationist than a lot of other members of the administration. And at times, that has been very effective. But there is a kind of very soft-handed seeking diplomatic ends to things that do not have soft-handed diplomatic ends to things. That seems to be coming out of Steve Witkoff and Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, on the public face of this, Donald Trump says that he's very happy when he was asked about Rubio and Vance and kind of the whole of it, because Rubio was also over in the Middle East negotiating between three parties: the Israelis, the Lebanese government, and then Hezbollah. And there are some different things that are coming out of that negotiation. First and foremost, a lot of quiet. But anyway, the President of the United States asked today if he was happy with all of this.
Thank you. What's the latest you've heard from the Vice President? Are you happy with his negotiations?
Yeah.
And can you share a little bit about what Secretary Rubio will be doing in the Middle East this week?
I think that they're doing a fantastic job. Our secretary is fantastic. I think he's maybe going to go down as the best ever. And I thought J.D. Vance this morning was fantastic. I watched his news conference, and from Switzerland, he's a very smart guy. Did a great job. You know, when I look at the Democrats, I call them the Democrats. They're dumb. The Democrats. When I watched that, where one of them thought it was World War XI. She said World War XI. She meant World War II. You know about that, right? This is one of their potential leaders.
So the President of the United States, he's asked the question, are you happy with this? And he calls Marco Rubio very smart. He calls J.D. Vance very smart. He says he's very happy with it. And then he moves on to a totally different subject, essentially saying that there are worse people in the United States who want the country to lose either way, which is true. Not necessarily quite. It is the answer to the question. It's not a full head-on answer, but again, this is Trump just answering as what comes into his head.
Ilhan Omar, who married her brother to get into the country, by the way, illegally. But when I watch AOC have no idea on a simple question, what happened when she was over in Switzerland, which she probably never went there before, but she was. And then I watch somebody like JD or Marco. I said, what a difference. What a difference. What a difference a brain makes.
Okay. So thank you very much to MRC and Newsbusters for providing those particular clips. So that all said, I want to move to what actually happened in Switzerland. Maybe I shouldn't. There is some money that is actually supposedly being unfrozen. It's not clear at this point in time if this is $12 billion, which is being released. The President of the United States was asked if Iran is getting money and what this money is for. And President Trump suggests like the old Saddam Hussein brokerage technique from George H.W. Bush, which is not something I thought I would see from this administration. So to buy off Saddam Hussein for a long time until eventually we killed him, we suggested that, well, you know, he will give us oil and we will give him food. And that will be great because, see, then there's no money that they can use for anything. A little bizarre because this administration has said openly that money and goods are fungible, meaning that if you give someone money, like let's say Planned Parenthood, you say, well, we're going to fund Planned Parenthood for X, Y, and Z. And then they turn around and they use that money for a bunch of various programs that don't have to do with abortion and cover the back end, and then use all of their donations to cover abortion. So they can shift funds around to do so. Iran is likely to do the same thing here because we saw Saddam Hussein in Iraq do the exact same thing. But here's Trump making the suggestion that our farmers are going to get their goods purchased by Iran. This is being touted by a lot on the online sphere as like a mega huge deal. I'm very skeptical, but here's the president's remark.
One of the things that we are doing also, and it came up last night, is money that's being unfrozen is going to be used to buy food, and the food's going to be bought exclusively through the United States from our farmers. And corn, soybeans, all of the things they need are going to be bought from our farmers.
Now, why do I not believe this? Because if it is true that it is Qatar who released two $6 billion payments to Iran, if it is Qatar that is doing so, then would Qatar not be the brokering body that is overseeing where the money is being transferred to and from? Why wouldn't I believe that Qatar is actually going to make sure this happens? Well, because when Vance was in Switzerland, he was openly embarrassed and snubbed. I mean, my God, the secondhand embarrassment. To see the Vice President of the United States treated this way? So what you can see here is that the Vice President of the United States is standing there next to the Defense Minister of Pakistan, who is an abhorrent, disgusting human being anyway. But I understand diplomacy, you have to stand next to individuals. I've had to stand next to members of Blackwater, so I get it. But anywho, here you see the Qatari minister going up and hugging and kissing and smooching the defense minister of Pakistan and completely ignoring the Vice President of the United States. Completely. And then Vance kind of offers a hello and he just kind of looks away and does the little, oh, I'm not really shaking hands with you. That's embarrassing. That's humiliating. It's the Vice President of the United States. Why go over there and be humiliated like this? and then turn around and I'm sorry, this is just absolute. This is false. But anyway, here's how Vance's office is playing it off.
So look, yesterday was a very, very good day. We made a lot of good progress. We did exactly what we wanted to do, which is accomplish 4 things for the American people. First, we wanted to build a mechanism for keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. It is open. We've seen, of course, gas prices and oil prices come down, millions and millions of barrels of crude and natural gas flowing through the Strait of Hormuz that weren't flowing before.
By the way, that's very, very excellent political communication. Vance is excellent. Seriously, I do wish that I had the communicative talent for being in the middle of it and saying, look, we got a lot of things out of here. We set up this framework for things because things are already going good and they're about to be better. The problem is that right up at the beginning, we're setting the framework for an agreement. There has not been a single agreement that the Iranian government has lived by. Even the famed JCPOA by Barack Obama, Iran violated 15 minutes after it was signed. And now we have the Vice President of the United States bragging that the IAEA is going to be allowed into Iran. And as I said at the time about the JCPOA, which again would have sunsetted by now, so it doesn't matter anyway. But in this case, the JCPOA suggested that Iran had to let in members of the International Atomic Energy Agency into Iran to investigate and look around at things. And so Iran brought the IAEA to various different sites around Iran. Don't take my word for it. You can go look at all of the Al Jazeera reporting where they're boasting about all this. And they're taking them to all of these various sites, but they never go to Isfahan. Isn't that curious? They go to all of these other various sites. And the Iranians show them what they want to see. Just like if you go to China or North Korea, the Chinese and the North Korean government will show you what they want you to see. It's not difficult. When Soviet Premier Khrushchev came over to the United States, we gave him a Chevy and said, go wherever you want. It's all real. And it terrified him. The Iranians aren't going to let the IAEA go anywhere. Anyway, we'll let them actually celebrate that moment and among his de-escalation station conjunction function.
But we also wanted to make sure that we actually set up the coordination mechanism so that we could demine the Straits of Hormuz, so that when there are the conflicts that inevitably come up, we can make sure we work through them rather than that leading to escalation. And that is exactly what we did yesterday. Number 2, we also wanted to build a mechanism, a similar mechanism for deconfliction for the regional ceasefire. As the President of the United States has himself said, sometimes these ceasefires just mean you're shooting a little bit less, but we wanted to make sure that we had the proper coordination set up so that if there is shooting, if Hezbollah fires at Israel or if Israel responds, if there are other conflicts that arise in the region, we're actually talking to each other and figuring out how to stop the shooting, how to make the region safer, our allies and everybody else.
Okay, I can't stand this. This is a very common thing in politics and I hate it. And by the way, when I'm criticizing here, and when I say this is a very common thing in politics, I mean very, very, very good friends of mine, every single one of the people that I work with, this is a very common thing that is an understanding. This is normal, where you say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to open up back channels. So that if in public you ever call me really awful things, if in public you ever throw a punch at me, drop aside. There we go. It's going back up. Sorry about that little radio hiccup there. Sometimes YouTube gets a little excited and drops the stream like a Yorkie peeing itself. All right, so that regarding the Vice President of the United States, right here, right now, the argument he is making that we have established some back channels to talk so that if they shut the Strait of Hormuz, which they're gonna, and if they throw more mines in the Strait of Hormuz, which they're gonna, or if Hezbollah kills an American citizen again, which they're gonna, or if, because again, the Iranian regime also executed over 40 dissidents today. One of the things that the United States says, hey, don't do that. So as soon as we're going to reach out and we're going to have a little powwow and say, what Joe Biden said? Don't. What Kamala Harris said? Don't. Is that the plan? That's like the major concession you got, is that we may talk first? Okay.
We set that up as well. Number 3, and this is probably what we're most excited about as Americans, the Iranians have agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into their country. That is a major milestone for the American people and the first step in permanently denuclearizing or permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. That's exactly what we asked to happen. We made a lot of great progress on other nuclear talks. And that leads me to the final thing that we wanted to accomplish, which is actually set up the process for the technical negotiations that will follow.
Okay, no. And here's why. I don't like the idea, and I'm just going to give you my straight take on this because I don't lie to you guys. I don't give you anything else than exactly what is happening right now. This is obviously a play to relax things for the midterms. It is. The problem is that the route to do this is to humiliate Donald Trump. It is. To make that perfectly clear, Vice President J.D. Vance went to Switzerland and was then mocked. He was then mocked and scorned and laughed at, and Golliboff did so. The rest of the world did so. And what did they get? What was the big get? Well, we agreed that someday we're going to make a project for a procedure to talk about what we plan to procedurally discuss. Nope. Now, we all understand that's silly. And by the way, Vice President Vance understands that's silly. He does. He's a very, very good politician. He's a very, very bright man, and I have a lot of respect for him. The hyper-isolationist, we can make friends and broker handshaky agreements with everybody is retarded. It's retarded. It's retarded when it comes from Tucker Carlson. It's retarded when it comes from Barack Obama. It's retarded when it comes from Nikki Haley. It's stupid. Deciding magically and suddenly that we could just broker agreements and train up friends was how we got in long drawn-out conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, as he knows perfectly well. Iran has never honored an agreement ever. What's the solution? It's going to be painful. Because we've waited, we've goofed around. It's going to be painful. It is. None of that requires the United States to permanently occupy Iran. None of that requires the United States anything to what does require that the United States is actually going to have to continue strikes. And by the way, to make this clear, that will happen before midterms. I guarantee it. And the reason I guarantee it, Trump right now is being dragged through the mud on this. He's being humiliated. Donald Trump hates being humiliated. He hates it. Right now, he's being made to look weak, which is why in the middle of this, when Iranians were, again, the Iranians were in the middle of mocking the United States all the way up until and in the negotiations. Vice President said, well, you get out there and you trash talk. No, it's not trash talk. They're chanting death to America. What do you think that means? When the transgender activist says, oh, we should kill Charlie Kirk, and then they kill Charlie Kirk, guess what? Doesn't take a super duper investigative, hypo super incredible detective to pick out a master theory. Maybe some people are just awful dirtbags, and maybe you don't have to make concessions for them. There's some things you can't solve with violence. Please, by all means, name them. I can't help but notice that in South America, the countries who are electing right-wing politicians to power are beginning by building prisons to throw all of the criminals in violently. I can't help but notice that Immigration Customs Enforcement arresting the most violent criminals, or the National Guard arresting the most violent criminals in Washington, D.C., seems to make the city a little bit safer. Violence doesn't solve everything. Well, when the other culture only believes in violence, Now, the President of the United States did say during the negotiations that if Iran did not, if they shut the Strait of Hormuz again, which they're going to, for the record, and they've already announced like 3 or 4 times they're going to shut it again. We're already here again, as I told you we would be. The president said if they shut the Strait of Hormuz again, then he said we won't even let them go back to their effing country. Like we would kill Golliboff on his flight back from Switzerland. So first and foremost, yes, correct, 110%. If you see one of the people from Iran in public, send a hellfire, my man. AGM missiles are freaking sweet. Find some devilishly handsome, bearded Hoosier who's willing to pilot an MQ-9, and then you just drop a little special package and have some fun. You don't have to treat these individuals as though they are human beings. Golliboff and the Iranian regime are not human. They murdered 40,000 people and routinely slaughter, rape, and enslave little girls. I don't have to treat that trash like it's human. No. You know who should be in charge? The very dissidents that they're hanging right now. Now, to Carla Hinson's question in the comments, said, so I'm sure this is a dumb question. It's not. So how are the Iranians actually shutting the Strait of Hormuz if we have eradicated their Navy and their Air Force? That is a great question. And I made a similar joke over on X. I'm going to find it here because it's a question that deserves to be answered. So the Iranian, what was the actual statement? They had like a Navy PR person from Iran that got up in front of the international community and said, hey, we are going to shut the Strait of Hormuz and all of the ships need to stop and talk to us. The reason that they can do that is because the Iranian regime has a lot of RPGs and other style of rocket-propelled grenades, various kinds of rocket launchers and drones that they can throw at commercial shipping from the tiny islands like Keshem Island that you've seen us bombing and other coastal regions. The Strait of Hormuz ain't that big. It just isn't. The Strait of Hormuz is under, goodness, it's only a couple miles across at a couple of points, or at one point specifically, I should say, and it goes around a weird bend anyway. So at least in this particular instance, as far as the Iranians are concerned, they can throw a lot of rockets in. The answer, by the way, is to occupy Keshem Island and occupy Karg Island would be the answer, and then flatten the entire coastline of the Strait of Hormuz on the northern side. That would be the answer, for the record. Now, that last thing said here, there is a final summary from the President of the United States, because I realize a lot of this is kind of like doom and gloom. This kind of sucks. Whether we are talking, remember Pam Bondi? Remember the Attorney General, Pam Bondi? Remember how we kept seeing months and months and months of really bizarre prosecutions that went absolutely nowhere? We saw like no arrests. And we saw this Attorney General who would get up in front of the podium and go, this administration, and posture and promise a bunch of things and then do nothing. Remember that? And then eventually Donald Trump got tired of it. He got tired of being embarrassed. And then he got rid of her. I know some of you still say, oh, it was a sideways promotion. Come on. So anyway, Pam Bondi was removed. And then we got Todd Blanche, who was better in every single way, shape, and form. And then we had Kristi Noem. And Kristi Noem did a bunch of like horse girl commercial, boy, I look good in Wrangler jeans on the horseback style. Oh, I'm down here at the El Salvador prison taking photo ops, kind of nonsense. And not doing things like law enforcement. Instead, like banging your mistress, master, whatever you call it when it's the dude, inside the administration after Corey Lewandowski had already been fired. Trump got tired of being embarrassed. And so he got rid of her. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen running a much tighter ship, letting law enforcement do the law enforcing. All right. When Donald Trump, now, do I think that he's going to kick out the VP? No. Because VP Vance, again, is smart enough that if Donald Trump brings him in and says, JD, listen, we love you, but you got to stop this negotiation crap. Rubio and Hegseth and everyone else is pretty pissed. Here's the president making, essentially, should we be doing all of this now? Sure. But here's the president making it clear we're going to be returning to this sooner rather than later. Here you go.
If Iran doesn't live up to their agreement, or if they're not behaving, I will do what I have to do. I think the blockade was more impactful than dropping bombs, if you want to know the truth. It was, like I said, they call it the steel wall. Nobody got through. Not one ship got through, able to go to Iran. They got through if we wanted them to go through. And we could set that up again in about 15 minutes. I would say, Pete, one phone call. How long would it take? Maybe half hour?
You're ready to go right now if you need to.
It'll be before we finish the meeting.
Did you hear how quickly that answer was given? They'd be there right now. There is one thing that works with honor cultures. In trust cultures, you and I can make agreements. You can. You and I can make agreements. I can trust you to watch my backpack while I go to the bathroom. You can trust me to allow you to go first at the stop sign. I can trust various individuals in my community. That is a core component of a trust-based society, understanding that you also have a broad communal best interest at heart for the country, for the nation state, for the community. And that stems from your brother in Christ. And that as a Christian, I am supposed to love sacrificially. The first commandment, that you love your God. The second, that you love each other as you want to be loved. That golden rule. All right? And that is a trust-based society. In the Islamic cultures, and yes, in the Hindu and Sikh cultures, that is not the case. And by the way, in the Jewish community, that's currently being battled out by different members of the Jewish community in various parts of the world. They don't really ever talk about very much because you'd be accused of being, a Jew if you mention that or whatever. Anyway, so all that aside, on the honor system, it is all about strength. And if I can do something that will benefit me and will make me look better in the end, then I will do it. And it doesn't matter about you. It is all about strength. It is all about strength. And so right now, one of the reasons why the Kurds aren't standing up right now and actually doing their thing is because of honor culture. In a trust-based culture, we would say, we will give you these guns, trusting that in a couple of months, you will come fight. And when it was time to fight, nope, didn't happen. And it's frustrating. It is. So again, in this particular instance, the president making it clear, if we play this game forever, eventually his patience will run out. I think that's true.
No, we have, as long as they respect us, we're going to be fine. They don't respect us, things wouldn't be good, but they have a lot of respect.
Treasury lifted sanctions on Iranian oil today.
Well, I'm going to have to find out exactly the status, but if the sanctions go out, money's going to be put into this country. All that money's coming back in the form of purchases of food, which they desperately need. They have 91 million people, they can't feed them. So the money that we lift is going to go to our farmers, largely to our farmers.
I'm getting roasted by some of my KJV friends for misciting the golden rule. I'm not going to dive into Matthew and outline it, but yes, love your neighbor as yourself, or treat others as you want to be treated. If you want the Veggie Tales message version there, yeah. So that all said and aside, yes, there's not going to be any kind of respect. There's not going to be any kind of agreement here. And so, therefore, it's just a matter of time. Now, that last little bit aside, I did want to bring you one final piece of coverage for tonight before we move forward into the rest of our week. So, again, it's a wide open opportunity for Democrats to actually take the field here and do some pretty decent stuff. It is. I mean, well, they're not decent stuff, but the Ezra Klein abundance model would be effective right now. Are they doing that? No, they're not. And so that brings us to my personal favorite, the Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago. A Chicago Sun-Times article on June 16th said, quote, in a report published Tuesday, the group found that, quote, anti-trans violence is often compounded by broader structural barriers, end quote, and outlined suggested policy changes on a wider range of issues, including housing, workplace practices, and healthcare access. So in the middle of all of the rest of this just lovely, cream-filled disaster, Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago, while his entire city is pissed at him for losing the Bears, while, again, 36 some people shot in Chicago last weekend, because it's Chicago, it's Chirac. Here's what he quoted to that yesterday afternoon, quote, far too many transgender Chicagoans.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
The sense of belonging they deserve in their city has been denied by exclusion and barriers to opportunity in spaces that should feel safe and welcoming. Since declaring transfemicide state of emergency. Transfemicide. Yeah. Since declaring a transfemicide state of emergency, our administration has strengthened the city's capacity to support LGBTQ plus Chicagoans. This framework builds on that work by centering the voices and lived experiences of trans Chicagoans to start and chart a path towards a safer, more connected city. I'm still trying to figure out what on God's green earth is a transfemicide whatever. Incredible. I'm just thrilled to see just such stupidity charted out in beautiful and open course here. So best of luck to Brandon Johnson. Just downright thrilling, in fact. Really, really. All right, last little bit here before we're done. Again, our merch stuff is like back in stock. If you, for some reason, really, really, really want merch for some reason, you like this mug with my face on it for God knows why, you, random citizen, you can head over to dailysignal.com. Yeah, that's right. dailysignal.com. And over on that website, you will find a merch link at the bottom. Yeah. Cool. For all of you who bug us about that constantly. Also, in our link is a our description is a link to the Discord. That's where we're keeping in touch throughout this crazy, insane week. Tomorrow, we have so much more to discuss. There's way too much to cover in one night from over the weekend. And then, of course, major staff cuts at the office, the Director of National Intelligence under Acting Director Bill Pulte, inflation concerns, gun laws and gun crime stuff. And then, of course, the New York Times whining about being fatherless and then suggesting that women are dads at the same time. Not to mention people throwing algae into the reflecting pool and getting caught. Just, there's a lot of stupid. So I know, I'm sorry we don't have time to cover absolutely everything this evening. That's just the nature of the show, the Tony Kinnett Cast. So we'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. Again, hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell next to it so you're notified. Don't tell your friends about this show. Tell your enemies. I don't know why. It'd be just kind of funny. All right, have a great evening. We'll be back tomorrow. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. And unlike ABC's The View, our broadcast hour is a bona fide news program. Take care.